I have somehow managed to capture lightning in a bottle today. I have two people with me that I'm very excited to hear from. We have Marty Dern and Benjamin Cole, and I'm gonna call it Benjamin. I know that's the name
No,
on the.
call
I'm
me
gonna call
Ben.
you
Yeah, that's
Ben.
fine.
Ben,
That's fine.
if that's all right.
I may call you
Two.
Tom.
You know what? It wouldn't be the first time. That is all right. And they've done a lot of things in their illustrious career, but I remember them most, and this is just personal, as some of the earliest bloggers. And that's what I want to talk about today is this history of first wave church bloggers. You're looking at two godfathers. Is that fair? Is that, can I call you guys that? The godfathers of content creation when it comes to church blogging?
At this
I
point,
don't know if they like
I mean,
that.
I'm old enough that that's probably the only term that fits. Ben's younger, but he was at it, I think, before I was actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously we didn't sign up for some criminal syndicate, though. It's sometimes I wonder if that's what we actually were doing. Yeah, I think that it was a new form, and both Marty and I recognized not the full potential of the power of the internet and and blogging and utilizing that platform as a disruptive agent in the world's largest Protestant denomination, right? We were very much there was a sense we even talked about it like this is like for a moment we were like the band of brothers who were trying to figure out how we were going to build a siege wall against this fortress that in Southern Baptist life we felt had really I'll say I think I can speak for both of us, we felt had really gotten off course from what we've been told our denomination did. The story, the sort of birth narrative of our generation is that there was this tremendous problem of liberalism and the good. We were with the good guys. We were being trained by the good guys who'd saved the Southern Baptist Convention from all these people who were going to destroy it, and we were gonna face declines and lost churches and reduced baptisms, and it was all about missions and evangelism, and and we had to rescue the Bible from liberalism. And while we weren't there for those, Marty was there earlier than I was, but we were very much the second generation, and around 2004 to 2003, 4, I began blogging, but not on Baptist issues. It was a vehicle of an online journal. We were both ministers. It was a way to communicate with our churches, to communicate even personally with family members. It was a way to get published, It was a self-publishing vehicle of your thoughts about faith and public policy, and it was whatever you were thinking. It was vomiting online, right? Here's my reflections, and it was a daily thing, like put out thoughts daily, and in the form of an op-ed, and we were playing with that form. And then when some things were happening in our convention, and we recognized that the traditional media channels, Baptist Press, the various state Baptist papers, where the old school of writing op-eds, letter to the editor, that the machine, the fortress of the denominational institutions was not going to be open to our engagement. And the internet had given the ability to get our message out directly out around and in front of the traditional media channels of the denominational fortress, and it caught fire. Marty, you may have a different perspective on that, but it really started more as a personal blog, a ministry tool, and then was channeled toward, when we recognized its power, its ability to influence things.
Yep.
It took off.
Vomit, and fire are two words I think would have been used of both of you by some of the establishment leaders.
Vomit.
And yeah,
and we were in our bathrobes and house shoes when we were vomiting too. Don't forget that part.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
This is the most dressed up I've ever been for
So
Usually
I want,
usually I'm in pajamas, right? Marty was
I
wearing a muumuu.
want, I want our audience to understand the power of the form that you both used. And I started blogging for Outreach Magazine at the same time, but I was not blogging in the way that you were. You were blogging to make institutional change in the convention, and there was such power in what you were doing. And I want our audience to understand. I mean, we're about 10 years into the internet. Well, the internet's been around longer than that, if you want to go back to like ARPANET days and things like that. But 10
Well, I
years of
mean,
like
when was
mass
Al Gore in
adoption.
college?
It's exactly 10 years into the internet. And all of a sudden, people are figuring out we can put something out there. This is before streaming. There's no streaming at this time.
There's no social media.
There's no social media. It's hard to fathom what this short time period was between 2004 2010 really, and how much power there was in the written form. And as a writer, it was kind of a bit of a glory day for me. You're talking about the internet with the power of written form, and you could change things. So I remember both of you kind of changed the 2006 election of the president of the convention. There were things that shifted because of your writing. So Marty,
Let me address
what?
go back just a bit. Ben was
Yeah,
blogging
give us that
before I was,
insight.
Ben was blogging before I was blogging, and I got into it as a result of the Younger Leader Forum that Jimmy Draper had built on lifeway.com. If you remember, he had a conversation with, I think it was Chris C. At a hospital. And Chris was bemoaning the fact that he didn't feel like the convention was for him anymore. And it largely had to do with leadership styles and worship styles and new thinking that some younger pastors were bringing into the convention. And they felt like, as Ben alluded to, that they were either being ignored or actively sidelined from the machinery or the opportunities within the convention. So that's how I got started in it. And then after that, a guy named Steve McCoy started a blog called Reformissionary, and a lot of people wound up commenting there. And then I found out you could actually start a blog for nothing. So I started a blog for nothing. And the spread of things, excuse me, came from people having to subscribe to your blog or the various blog rolls. Ben, you remember the blog rolls, I'm sure, where you connected to everybody, you linked to everybody's blog on the sidebar and all that kind of stuff. So and the comments were hyperlinked. So there was no Facebook to comment on. So the comment sections of blogs were super active, and all your comments were hyperlinked back to your blog. So that's, I think, how a lot of it grew. It did grow organically. There wasn't any other way for it to grow. If we had Facebook and Twitter back then, holy smokes, I just love to think about how much farther, how much broader, and how much more impact could have happened if just those tools had been available. But when I started blogging, it was, the subtitle of my blog was Thoughts and whatever, conversation about the future of the Southern Baptist Convention. So I did start off with an aim to at least have conversations that had to do with the SBC. And that's how my blog was formulated to begin with.
I think also that the connectivity that pre-social media, there was a blogging community that it was formed in the comment threads. You found out who felt the same way you did, who was reading the Times and seeing some of the events that were transpiring in Southern Baptist life. And then the other thing it did is it provided a vehicle for people inside the denomination, employees down inside the seminaries and the publishing house and the mission boards and missionaries. I mean, I would track my geo hits from all over the globe, and I was stunned at the audience that I was gaining around the world. And that reach was impossible before the internet. And so because so much of the controversy involved what was happening at the mission boards, I mean, we had missionaries like crazy my comments were moderated. I don't think Marty's were, but because of that, I had a channel, a vehicle for whistleblowers who wouldn't be outed, who could tell me some of the things that were going on inside the boards. And so while Marty, I got to give credit, I think Marty is a better writer than I am. I know that he is a better researcher than I am. There are times where I would get like the material and dump it on Marty and say,
Yeah,
now,
that's
Marty, go write, you got to write this. and then I'd go on and go back on a little treasure hunt for more documents. What I was able to do, and I think, and to this day, still, what made the Baptist Blogger was there was a sense in which, like, the Baptist Blogger is the guy who found the nuclear codes, right? That I had this arsenal of information, documents, correspondence that I was dumpster diving for the garbage of the conservative resurgence, and I was. I mean, I wasn't going in dumpsters. I never went through garbage. I never entered any place illegally. I never accessed documents without authorization. I never. But there was this fear that struck in like 2005. I could go out and just publish an excerpt of an email.
Yep.
And people would be like, okay, Ben has the receipts. And I've scrupulously, like, through these 20 years now, I think I have maintained at least the reputation of somebody who, if I make a claim, if I made a truth claim about something, a claim of fact about some bad actor or some subversive influence in the convention, I could produce a receipt that backed up what I said. And there are times that Marty and I would discuss some of the problems. We can talk about sort of what were those problems we identified and what really caught fire. But there are times that Marty would say, you know, Ben, we know this is going on. And I'm like, yeah, and here's this document, and here's this file folder, and I was faxing and emailing. I was flying around the country to give people dossiers of documents that corroborated their suspicions of what was going on inside the rotten gut of the world's largest Protestant denomination. And it scared the so-called power brokers to death.
Well, I know that it did.
Go ahead,
I know
Sam.
that it did, because understand where I'm at this time. And I want viewers and listeners to kind of get a feel for, Sam, why are you interviewing these two guys? So I was in my early to mid 20s. I was beginning to feel a call to ministry. I was in the corporate world. I was at an age where I was beginning to understand that not everyone that is in power or aspires to have power has noble intentions, even in the religious world. And it was a healthy process for me. I'm reading some of your stuff. One, I enjoy good writing. Both of you are great writers. So I just like to read, and I like to write too. Don't know how good I am, but I enjoy reading. And I'm reading this stuff and I'm going, with both of you, I'm like, man, that's funny. Is it true? And so I would go to my dad, who was one of the entity leaders at the time. And I'd say, this guy Marty, this guy Ben, they're making some claims here. Is this true? And now, many times he didn't know. You know, he was not part of that, you know, structure that was trying to, you know, he was just happy to run a business at Lifeway.
Well, in fairness, there are some letters of your dad from the 80s writing to Paige Patterson and saying, hey, here's what's happening at Southern, and I want to give you the inside information.
Yeah,
I mean,
no doubt.
He was a little informant at the seminary.
No doubt.
I mean,
he was a foot soldier.
My files. I got
no, it's fine. It's fine. He was a foot soldier in the conservative resurgence of that. There is no doubt. He has been very clear about that. But he was able to confirm a lot of the things that you were writing. That's my point. And I'm going, this is fascinating, because I'm seeing a power structure that I respect. My dad's a part of it. But it's also one that has way more of an underbelly than I ever realized. And goodness, even back then, we did not know, all of us, none of us knew just how bad it really was. And some of that stuff is even today coming to light. We're just learning new things every day. But Marty, did you see yourself as part of a movement? You know, or was it just, I just feel like I need to write, and you just put something out there? I mean, I think some people think that this was a bit more coordinated than it was, but you tell me. I mean, you know, what was going through your mind at the time?
Yeah, well, the main problem is I've never known when to keep my mouth shut, I think, is the real big problem here. I mean, I've kind of had a bent toward there shouldn't be things that are hidden, and things that should be exposed. And so as I began to get more involved in the political knowledge, which is where my relationship with Ben kind of formed, then it was like, okay, this isn't right, and somebody needs to be talking about it. So Ben and I met via email, and then we talked on the phone a couple of times. There were people that Ben knew that I did not know that I came to know. I will bring up, and Ben will recall, there was a guy named Art Rogers who was in Kentucky at the time. I didn't know Art. He started a blog. Couple of guys in
12
Oklahoma.
Witnesses. 12 Witnesses.
12 Witnesses. Yep.
His blog.
And so none of us coordinated the starting of these blogs, and there wasn't any like secret handshake about you get to be in the group and you don't get to be in the group. It was all really, really unofficial. That doesn't mean that we didn't talk to each other. We did. We emailed all the time, talked on the phone a lot. If there were meetings like trustee meetings, for instance, for the IMB, and we were all there, then yeah, we'd have dinner or we'd hang out and that kind of thing. But it was more
on our computers the whole time.
Yeah. And to Ben's earlier point about they didn't know what hit them, there were computers set up in the lobby of the IMB, and they were having a trustee meeting. And when they came out of the trustee meeting, I had my blog open and was updating, and I updated on what I saw as they were coming out of the room. And then I hit publish, and then we went to dinner. And one of the trustees got accused of leaking what had happened inside the meeting when I had not even talked to him when I published what was on my blog. So they had no concept of how quickly things could happen, and they were always running around blaming people for things that didn't happen. But I did not ever get a sense that I did eventually get a sense that there was a movement, because there were more and more people reading the blogs. I could go places and people would ask me, "Are you Marty? I read your blog." People would email, say, "Hey, you may not remember me." Ben was getting the same thing, I'm sure. Art was getting the same thing. And then we arranged some meetings, get-togethers for people at SBC meetings, but it was like room size stuff. This is not like renting a room out and having a guest speaker. We were all in a room drinking coffee and Coke and just getting to know each other. So there was a movement of sorts.
Drinking Coke, not doing Coke.
Yes.
Okay, just
on my side, I was drinking Coke. What they did when they left the room is not on my conscience. So there was, it was very grassroots. Nobody at the top was pulling any strings, even though there was some communication with some folks. I felt like it was as grassroots as it could be, though not completely unorganized. I wouldn't go that far.
Yeah, one of the things that...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, one of the things that I noticed at the time was through the blogosphere, these are older words now, right? But through the blogosphere, the best ideas would often rise to the top because you did not have the noise of social media. And the people at the time that were writing, for the most part, loved to write. They weren't doing it for power. They were doing it for change. And those that got into it first, this first wave, were like, I'm a writer. I can write about this. And I believe that what happened is that those ideas that were either the most inflammatory or the best ideas, and we can decide later which ones were inflammatory and which ones were the best ideas. Sometimes they're both. Were the ones that really caught the attention, that rose to the surface. You can't really see that anymore because of all the algorithms and that sort of thing with social media and how it's self-feeding now. And everything has become so muddied. And there was a pureness to what was happening. And you know, were intentions pure and motives pure? Well, goodness, I don't know motives. But in terms of what was getting read, it was the ideas that resonated the most. They weren't being force-fed to anybody.
Right.
You had to go seek this stuff out. And so people were genuinely wanting to know more. Ben, you wanted to say something.
Well, always. I think that first, you had said that, you used the word respect, Sam, just a second ago, that these were respected men. These leaders were respected. And I think it's very important for me, and I know it's true for me. I think it's true for Marty. There was a sense in which it was not a loss of respect for men who had served the Lord faithfully and were leading large organizations with large responsibilities. It was not a loss of respect. It was a recognition that the system of governance and accountability and transparency was failing. And I don't care how good a leader is. If he doesn't have accountability and his institution doesn't have transparency before the people who pay the bills, then he will slide into disrespect. He will take for granted the responsibilities and the privileges that he has. And so some of it was very much not an effort to sort of rip men off their thrones, but rather to remind them that they were mortal. And then what I think I brought into this, Marty may disagree with this. I really am I'm more of a pure strategist than I am a purist. And I recognized while blogging was going on and there was this blogging community, and Marty was much more a part of sort of the brotherhood of bloggers than I was. To some degree, I was intentionally, and still am, intentionally the toxic outlier. Even my closest friends would get together and say, oh, how can we stop him from saying things the way that he does? And, Marty's written about this. Like, people were just like, can we shut him up? He's going to hurt. He's gone too far this time, Cole. But I knew strategically that you couldn't just have this online community, that there still had to be an engagement with traditional media forms, not denominational press, but with the secular religion reporters at major national newspapers. And I was out cultivating those relationships as the source of primary reference for a number of the most influential religion reporters. And then it was just not religion reporters. It was people that were covering, politics and et cetera. Like, wait a minute.
You were the only person that did that because you were the only person that knew that needed to be done.
Yeah. So, I think that is accurate. And so while they were worried about, while denominational power brokers who wanted to stop this sort of free expression. And it's sort of like before Elon Musk was ever even doing what he was doing, we were trying to say, no, these online channels are the ways for free expression of ideas and the exchange of ideas. And the truth will get out. And there was no AI, artificial intelligence. There was no way to fabricate a story. Like, if you didn't tell something that was true, you would get uncovered as being a liar. And we were all of us, very committed to only speaking truth and promoting transparency. Now, you asked if we were, so what I was going to say about the traditional media. So while these bloggers were happening, I knew that you had to get the way to get the attention of the wider Southern Baptist Convention and the power brokers that were trying to discount bloggers in any number of ways. We weren't educated. We didn't have degrees. We didn't lead large churches. The churches that we led didn't have large Baptists. All that stuff that was being thrown at us. I didn't care about any of that because I'm on the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, page 1, A1 above the fold. I'm in paragraph 1. And that had influence. And so I was intentionally trying to make sure, and it was a day where, Paige Patterson, Paul Pressler, Al Mohler, man, the daily clip service was still a thing, right? There was no news aggregators, and people were still getting papers. And, at the Southern Baptist Convention, you may remember this, Sam, the papers were still being put in front of hotel rooms, and the local paper, if the convention was in Dallas, the Dallas Morning News, page A1 was Southern Baptist Convention, and paragraph 1 was bloggers are laying siege. And by the time we get to the convention in 2006, it happened very quickly. I also knew not only did you have to seize sort of the channel of traditional media to get your voice heard, to show that you were legitimate. It legitimized blogging that secular religion reporters were covering what we were doing, and that they knew what we were saying was right, that we had the financial records. We were opening a window of religion reporters who usually would just do sort of man in the street interviews at the convention. Now they could go to press with filings and financial disclosures and insider information, which is sexy for the media, right? They want those kinds of stories. We get to 2006 and we all back a candidate and he wins on the first ballot. The institutionalists were scrambling, trying to find, they had one very unpopular candidate who's, I won't go into names here. They had another candidate who eventually, talk about losing your church and flaming out, right? They couldn't latch on to a candidate. The candidate we backed, won. And so there is, immediately at the Southern Baptist Convention's annual meeting in 2006, not only have we been legitimized in the fact that we're being covered by the media as a legitimate influence in this denomination, now we're the victors. Now it is a movement. And then we saw people coming along because everyone wants to be on the winning side, right? So once you win, and you score a victory, then we go to 2007, and that was the Garner motion, right? Remember that, Marty? And it's like, we're going to stop. Now that we have a president with a gavel at the convention who is favorable to what we're doing. He's not going to shut us down. He's not going to use the gavel and parliamentary procedure to rule us out of order. He's going to let us get to the microphone and speak. And when we do that in 2007, again, a narrow victory on a procedural motion that basically says we're tired of this increasing rightward shift in the SBC. We need to be the convention of the massive middle. The liberals are gone. The specter of liberalism in the SBC is specious. It is a tool that's being used to paint me as a liberal, Marty as a liberal, and now we've won again. And you have to not just score sort of blog hits. You don't just have to have site visits. You don't just need to have a number of comment threads and people subscribing to your blog roll. Now you also have to have the media hits in traditional media, and you've got to score wins on the convention floor. And within a 2-year period of time, we utilize blogging to do all of that. Mm-hmm. And then Marty says, I'm done. And I said, I'm done, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating because the traditional media outlets were beginning to decline at that point, and religion reporting especially was going away. And so there was a vacuum that you guys filled during that time. So there's a convergence of several different factors here. And I remember getting interested in a lot of this, not because of the drama, although that's always fun, but because I was concerned about the data. So I started writing in 2004 about the claims that, we're doing really, really well as a convention. And I'm looking at the data going, we're not, we're down, we're declining. We've reached an inflection point and something's wrong. The promise of the conservative resurgence was more baptisms and more missionaries and more money and more everything. And I'm looking at it and I'm going, it's not happening. I agree. I am a conservative. I agree with a lot of what theologically what the conservative resurgence stood for, but it didn't produce the fruit. And so I got interested in all of this because I'm a researcher and I'm going, something's wrong. I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong. And now we learn that it was much more than just poor methodologies and internal conflicts. There was horrific abuse occurring at the highest levels of leadership. We didn't know that. I'm assuming if you guys had known that, you probably would have blogged about it. I didn't know about it.
That was never on my radar screen, not even once.
So it's like you see the fruit of the problem. And you guys are beginning to go down that road. And 2006 was a turning point in many, many ways, because I remember because I've never really been an insider, but my dad was in leadership. So I kind of had some inside knowledge there. But I remember the fear, just the out and out fear from a lot of these top leaders of, oh my goodness, we've lost.
Let me tell a story Ben probably won't tell. I know you'll remember it. But, there's always a slate of people that run for president, first vice president, second vice president. And Ben, I'm sure it was Ben came up with the idea, let's run Wiley Drake for second vice president. And so, did you call Wiley and ask him to allow his name to be nominated, or did he just volunteer himself to be nominated? Do you remember?
No. He was first nominated in 2005.
Okay.
And it was Bill Dodson.
Okay.
The convention was in Nashville. I'm sitting next to Bill Dodson, who was a friend of mine, and he'd kind of been an old warrior in the convention. I mean, he had a toupee, and he was sort of like he was a character, and had been on he'd been an employee of the annuity board. He'd been on the board of the annuity board. He actually was the father of Mission Dignity, or the Adopt Annuity program.
Wow.
He in the late 70s, he came up with that idea. So I said, hey, Bill, we're joking about, second vice president. I said, go nominate Wiley Drake. So he did, and he did it. It's like in the form of a resolution, which, Wiley was always offering resolutions, and he failed. And he said, I said, Wiley, you got to tell him in 2005, you got to tell him if you don't elect him this year, I'll be back next year, and I'm going to nominate him every year until you do elect him. So that set the framework up. And then in 2006, he won, but it was sort of a mockery.
But hang on, there was another candidate that had been who at that point was an up and coming large church pastor, who has since gone on to be a really large church pastor and is now a former president of the SBC. And Ben knows this guy. I won't use his name. Ben, you can spill the beans if you want, but Ben called him when it came out that the traditionalists, I would say the power brokers, were going to nominate this guy for second vice president. Ben called him and said, you need to withdraw or you're going to get beat in your own backyard by Wiley Drake. And he did.
I want to hasten to make this point. Blogging was a tool of transparency. Mm-hmm. And not just transparency about the institutions. It was even transparency about ourselves. It was an act of making yourself vulnerable, to put yourself out there and your ideas, because you knew that you were running the risk of the convention machine was not going to recommend you to bigger positions. You weren't gonna be promoted because you were an assailant of the power system. Mm-hmm. So there was a sense of not just transparency about the institutions, but transparency about yourself, our weaknesses. They came out. So it was reflective transparency. But what's crazy, and I cannot stress to the degree to which I am stunned at what has happened just this week. And we're recording this at the end of September. The machine, the denominational power brokers, they did what institutionalists always do: suppress, clamp down, try to block the flow of information, which only increases the questions that are being asked and the number of people who are asking those questions. So it actually, the efforts that institutions have to suppress dissent, to silence the critics, only metastasizes and increases the influence of those who are criticizing. So that is what happened. And yet this last week, I was at the executive committee meeting. Marty can remember. They were furious that we were blogging. There was no Twitter at the time, that we were writing. We were telling in public what was happening behind closed doors. And we got to stop blogging. We got to restrict bloggers to our trustee meetings. We got to make sure that we refine our governance policy so that nobody can leak any information, and you'll be censured. You'll be kicked off the board if you share this information with the bloggers. I mean, that was happening. And then this past week, I'm at the executive committee meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention, and I'm real-time tweeting what's going on. The chairperson's presents this motion. This is being discussed. An amendment's being offered. And I've got this guy who comes up to me who's an outside contractor for the executive committee. He says, you're in violation of the policy, and we could ask you to leave. And I'm just like, This isn't my first rodeo, cowboy. Right? You do whatever it is you think you got to do, and it will backfire now just like it did then, because the impulse of institutional protectionists hasn't changed. Lock down the information, restrict the flow of information, silence dissent, because they think in doing so they are protecting institutions from the criticism that comes from those who are promoting transparency. And it always backfires, and we were the beneficiaries of the groundswell that grew in the wake of the efforts to suppress the thing we were doing.
Well, the
Do you
hypocrisy is
find it?
seen in that those meetings that Ben is in are the open meetings. He wasn't like in a committee meeting that was closed off and he just snuck in and was hiding under a chair. This is an open forum that anybody can attend. And yet when he
Any
takes
Southern
the
Baptist.
information outside, Southern Baptist, when he takes the information outside the room, all of a sudden he's breaking the rules. Well, if it's truly an open forum, it doesn't matter where the information goes.
Marty, do you find it ironic that the Southern Baptist Convention has become about as unbaptistic as we can be, given the history of Baptists and freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of transparency? That's not in the Bill of Rights, but it's implied.
Yeah.
The things that we are supposed to stand for, we have become the opposite of those things.
I'll give you the short answer because it's really the only one that I know. I'm not surprised, because when the objective becomes getting power and keeping power, everything else goes out the window.
Yeah. We've become so far removed from Roger Williams and John Leland and the great American heroes of Baptists in this land.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that, other than the abuse and the victims that deserve justice,
Right.
that's the part that burdens me the most, is we don't seem to even know what it means to be Baptist anymore. Marty, what did you do to handle the heat from the establishment leaders? Because I know you both took it. So what?
He went to work for Lifeway.
Well, I'm going to let him answer that question, Ben.
He went inside the system. He sold his soul. That's what he did.
I went to work for my dad. Thank you very much.
So,
Marty,
the devil himself.
Yes, and I'm probably the only low-level employee in the history of Lifeway that had to interview with the CEO just to get the opportunity to get a job.
Marty Duran went to the third level of hell. He went to work for Ed Stetzer.
Oh, dude. How many levels are there beyond that? 7. No. While I was the majority, all of the time that I spent blogging with SBC Outpost, I was pastoring as well. I would openly say now, I don't know that I realized it then, but I would say now that my pastoral ministry probably suffered some because of the time that I spent writing and talking and emailing and becoming a sounding board for people in the state, because at the same time this was going on nationally, each state had its own issues that were going on. So some of us were looked at or were contacted as within the state for feedback and help and encouragement for other pastors. So my pastoral ministry to my church probably suffered somewhat during this time. But as far as personal, I got warned early on about the danger. I think Ben mentioned this, maybe, or Sam, you did, about not getting promoted, not getting opportunities. And I just resigned myself to that fact. It wasn't anything I'd ever looked for, so it wasn't a loss to me. And by the time I went to Lifeway, I mean, it was a job. I wasn't even denominational.
Yeah.
So I took it. I needed a job, so I took it. If Ben had offered me one at his consulting firm, I would have taken that one too. But
he would have passed the background check.
Yeah. Well, I'm friends with you. That's why
if you're that kind of unsavory character, the only place you could work is Lifeway.
It's my association with unsavory characters that gave me the problem. But it was, I mean, my wife and I were in constant communication. I mean, one of the funniest things about that period of time is I didn't actually read blogs. Sonia read all the blogs, and she would tell me which articles I needed to read, and that's the ones that I read. I just didn't have time to read them all. I do want to say one of the things that Ben commented on before was he would get information together And when he didn't have time to write something himself, he would pass the information along to me. Well, there were two specific times that actually ended in substantial happenings. One was when Dwight McKissick was preaching in chapel at Southwestern Seminary, and I'm driving around next to the Mall of Georgia, and Ben calls and he's screaming into the phone, "Are you watching Southwestern Chapel?" Listening to it, I guess. Southwestern Chapel. Dwight McKissick just said that he prays in tongues. You got to write something about this. So I managed to get back home and wrote some little thing, and it caused quite a stir. But Dwight himself caused the stir. But then the other thing was Southwestern was going to change their investment policy for their foundation, I think. And Ben called that. They were moving the funds from, I guess it was the Texas Baptist Foundation or something like that.
The Baptist Foundation of Texas, yeah.
Yeah, to another firm, and I don't remember the name of it. And Ben just rattled off this list of questions, and I was sitting at my desk. I wrote down a bunch of questions that he had written down. And over the next couple of days, I made some phone calls, did some research.
No, you did it faster than that.
Was it really?
It was, oh yeah. Their trustee meeting was beginning the next day.
Okay.
And I knew. So what had happened was,
yeah.
what had happened was, Southwestern Seminary, go figure, under Paige Patterson was having some financial difficulties, but they're sitting on a $90 million endowment. And, endowment rules are you can't just sort of tap the principal, and Paige, couldn't get his hands on that cash. So he was going to move the money, where he would have a little more ability to control the $90 million. And I had the information, which I could say it now. I got it from a trustee. He's dead, but there was a trustee named R.E. Smith. Let them dig up his body and penalize him for doing this. But R.E. Smith would call me and he'd say, "Ben, there's a package for you on my front porch. Someone delivered it. It has your name on it. I don't know what it is." And I'd drive to South Lake, Texas, and I'd, go up on his front porch, and there's a box or a file or a manila folder, and it says, Ben Cole, and I'd take it and go dig through it. And so it was that trustees, and he wasn't the only one, by the way, but on that one, he gave me that, some of that information, and then another trustee, I called and said, "Are you looking at this?" Oh yeah, this is crazy. So I took that information and I went immediately to a FedEx Kinko's store and started faxing it to Sam Hodges. I didn't even have a scanner to send it. I faxed it to Marty. You got a fax from me over that stuff. And he writes this blog and says they're about to take this money. And if you remember at the time, one of the things about bloggers, and I think this is an important point to make, was that we were all a bunch of boozers, that we were weak on the issue of alcohol. And there was this resolution about, it was actually an anti-blogging resolution adopted by the convention that says if you drink alcohol, if you support beverage alcohol, you can't serve in the SBC. And that was really about Wade Burleson, was who that was attacking. And, so I found out this investment fund that Paige wanted to move his money to, owned, Budweiser stock, Anheuser-Busch. And at that point, the internet, you could go online and look at SEC filings and stuff. That was already coming along. Marty goes and he started doing the digging and said, Southwestern's about to put their money in a bunch of SIM stocks. And so he published that. And by the next day, the trustees are meeting, and you can go online and look. They had to issue a statement. They had put pause on the move. Yeah. That was in 2007. Well, in 2008, the financial collapse happens. And Paige, at that point, he couldn't get it moved from Southwestern's endowment moved at that time. But what he did was he used the financial collapse to cash out the entire endowment. Southwestern Seminary lost around $30 million by cashing out the endowment during the downtimes. He ended up getting the money, and then it was out the door. I want to say this. You asked at the beginning if we were the godfathers of blogging. I've never called myself that, but you're not the only one that has used that expression. It's important to remember it was not monolithic, and we weren't sort of supervising or governing or instructing or controlling anybody. There was a disparate group of bloggers. There was the Steve McCoy, Joe Thorne group of bloggers. There was Wade Burleson, who, he's never been on anybody's team. He's his own team. But Wade had a tremendous amount of influence. There was the Young, Restless, and Reformed bloggers. And then there were the survivor community bloggers. Tiffany Thigpen, that's my cousin, then known as Tiffany Croft. She had a blog, Wartburg Watch, Dee Parsons. They were using blogging to say, hey, there's a sex abuse crisis. Back in 2006, 2007. And the same way that we were getting sort of shut out from saying there's financial irregularities, there's governance problems, there's nepotism involved in trustee selection, all the things we were saying, they were saying, wait a minute, worse than that, those breakdowns of the governance system are why you're not able to address abuse. Mm-hmm. And that was all going on.
And nobody believed them. And what's really sad,
nobody believed them. And then there was one.
And they were right. They were right. And we now know that so much of this cover up and suppression was because there were some people doing some really horrible things.
Oh yeah. There was another group of bloggers. Sorry, Sam, I'm going to get this in. You can edit it out. There was another group of bloggers that formed, and they took on the name. They called themselves the Joshua Convergence. And it was guys like who's now the executive director of the Florida Baptist Convention, Steve Rummage. He was a part of that group. There was a guy who was named Jeff Crook. There was a guy named Brad Reynolds who went on to be at Truett McConnell. He's no longer there. But there were the sort of the institutional protectors, the young guys who were supportive of the very institutional leaders we were criticizing. They tried to do sort of their counterpunch with their online digital engagement. They started writing their stuff. You had Emer and Ergen Canner, and it became nothing. One, because what they were saying proved not to be true. And two, they were just bad writers. So to some degree, we were better writers, we were faster. And then there's another element, Marty, you've mentioned this in some of the things that you've written to me, and I think you even put it in some of the old SBC Outpost blogs. I didn't even know what I was doing at the time, but there was no meme. But man, I was memeing. I was grabbing funny videos, movies. When the homemaking program at Southwestern, we're going to make every woman, is going to learn how to bake cookies at seminary. I was throwing out old I Love Lucy videos and creating these humorous memes that people were laughing at. And that's another part of the strategic use of blogging. If you can get people to laugh at those you're criticizing, you're winning. And the one thing, the parallel between the abuse issue, while I was busy making people laugh at Paige Patterson, laugh at Ronnie Floyd, laugh at some of these institutional leaders, laugh even to some degree at Al Mohler, the abuse and survivor community were saying, we need to weep. Mm-hmm. And so because my ability, I won't say Marty, but my ability to help people laugh at what was going on was more interesting than those who were saying we should weep. And laughter eclipsed the sorrowful issues over which we should have been weeping while we were laughing. The Bible says there's a time to laugh and there's a time to weep. And I think sometimes I laughed too much and cried too little.
That's a good word. Marty, where do you see this legacy? It was highly influential from 2004 to 2010. And those are approximate dates, of course. There were some who were even earlier. Blogging kind of started around, technically around 2002, 2003 is when the medium kind of formed, but there were so few people doing it then. So just say 2004 to 2010, just an enormous amount of power involved in the written form. And now we've got different platforms. We've got a lot more voices on YouTube, Instagram, social media, everywhere. The way that you guys were doing things, as Ben just mentioned, with the memeing and stuff like that, before memeing was a thing, where do you see your legacy and how, and let's just put a positive spin on this as we close, what positive effects do you think occurred because of what you guys did?
I think I think there was a more openness to be critical, not in the bad sense, but to critique. Let me say it that way, so it doesn't sound as bad. Um, there was less fear of the establishment, which I think is good. There was a willingness to stand up for. I think some maybe late of the willingness that some people had to stand up for survivors might have been because other people were standing up for other issues earlier. I don't want to push like a hair's breadth too much credit on that, because I would imagine you could search my blog and you'd find no mention at all of sexual survivors, because I didn't know anything about it. Ben, I remember your posting that video of Patterson talking about the 16-year-old girl that was in the sermon or whatever. It was kind of when you came out of semi-retirement. And that was after I'd gone, and I was like, this is just so bad. If I had gotten that, would I have published it? Would I have had the guts to publish it? Honestly, I do not know. That was just another, it wasn't a bridge too far. It was just an area that I would have felt like underprepared to engage in. But I do think that for whatever openness that our pushing against the establishment created, that there was at least a crack in the door that allowed some other people to come behind us without the fear of being pummeled or having their credit checked and published, or their bank accounts, or lies told about them at church and those kinds of things. So I do think that there is a positive. If there's a negative now, I think one of your questions that you had sent was what happens next kind of thing. I don't think that you'll ever see this again, because everybody is able to create their own ecosphere of facts. It's not as easy. I could publish some of the same things now that I published then, and the response would be, no, this is not true because XYZ. And that would be the end of it. There wouldn't be any introspection. The trustees wouldn't change policies, because there's a whole ecosystem of facts that are distinct, and there are multiple ecosystems of these facts that are distinct, and you can live within your own ecosystem and never have to be challenged. So I do not think that would be the case today.
Ben, do you have any closing thoughts? I mean, what's the legacy here? What do you think your biggest contribution is?
Yeah, to scare the hell out of bad actors. That's
You do that well. You do that very, very well.
It's a spiritual gift.
I think sometimes I scare good actors too, which is a problem. For me, it really was not. For me, it has always been about good governance. That there's a tremendous stewardship of $200 million a year being given by 40,000 churches that are expecting that the people who are on the receiving end of that mission support are going to be good stewards.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a direct and immediate ability to control the direction of these institutions and how those resources are spent for noble purposes versus ignoble ones. And so I was then and am now an advocate of transparency for the purposes of accountability and good governance. I think early on, for sort of blogging generation 101, I still sort of use the moniker the Baptist blogger, though I almost don't blog anymore. I'm sort of the Baptist tweeter, or the Baptist Xer, I guess is what I've done. There was a very much, we have to point out what is being done by the CEOs, the executives, the institutional employees. Those were the power brokers. And I have come to the realization that that is the wrong approach. And so I am going to, and am in the process of shifting my focus, because you can raise all kinds of hell about CEOs and denominational leaders and denominational employees, people who are receiving their paychecks from the cooperative program, from the mission dollars. And it has minimal effect at changing things, because they are regulating and controlling and appointing their own boards. So what's the future for me? I'm going to start focusing on the trustees. Who are the people that are actually accountable to the convention, not a derivative accountability by means of their boards? And so I've done some of that in the past, but I think if there's any hope of getting this convention on the track it needs to, of trimming its sails and getting it on the track it needs to be, there is not just accountability for employees to trustees. There's got to be accountability of trustees to the convention that chooses them and the ultimate owner of these entities. And so I, with greater and greater interest, am going to work on trustee reform and accountability for the people who are voting to empower those who are implementing policies and withholding information. And I'm very concerned right now that our institutions and the employees of the institutions, I call them the apparatchiks of the denomination, the permanent administrative staff, are restricting the flow of information to their own trustees. They keep their own boards from knowing what's actually going on. And many times the boards don't even know what questions to ask. And I think at times there are trustees who are being selected for the very purpose of protecting the apparatchiks who've helped them get on the boards they now serve on. I'm going to be shifting my focus more and more to governance at the trustee level than administration at the employee level.
Ben's new slogan is power to the people.
Well, Ben, trustees are now put on notice. I'm sure some are listening to this. Do good, don't do evil. Marty, how can people watch what you're doing or read what you're doing now? What's the best way to check out where you are now?
Come steal my journal. I still post on my blog about once a month. It's not much. It's barely even enough to keep me interested in it. I don't have a Substack. Maybe I should. I don't know. I post on Facebook every now and then. I try to engage a little from a kingdom perspective when the elections roll around, but it's harder and harder to do that and have sane conversations. So that's a challenge. My blog is just blog.martyduran.com. You can subscribe there. I never email unless you get an alert that there's a new post. So anybody that subscribes would be appreciated. And other than that, just I'm still on not Twitter and on Facebook, but a lot less than I used to be. I'm old, man. I'm old.
Well, you still got it, and you still need to be writing. That'll be my encouragement to you.
I appreciate that.
Ben, how can people find where you are?
Yeah, well, first I have to allow them through the portal that I have restricted on X.com. So I, in fact, just yesterday, I think I purged over 300 people that were, I don't know how I ended up with so many East African followers, but
wow,
but I did. So I'm on Twitter. The blog is still out there. I've kept it up, and the archival benefit, I think. I still meet people at the convention and otherwise say, man, I'm a seminary student, and I'm going back, and I just have spent the last 3 days reading everything you wrote. And so I think there's some archival value of what I've done. And I think Marty has maintained an archive of some of his old writings. I wish that he would put it out so that it was published and accessible. People can follow me on X. The blog is still out there. Occasionally I may be, I'm doing a podcast now with Baptist News Global called Stuck in the Middle with You. Mark Wingfield, who's the editor of Baptist News Global. We're trying to, from the left and the right, sort of talk about Baptist issues and how we agree and disagree about things. So I've been experimenting with some new forms. Sam, at your encouragement, I'm doing this. You said, Ben, you got to get out there. You got to do video because that's where things are. And I've just, to invite someone into your home to see your dead animals and your old African posters and your bar over on the side that no one can view, right? The video, the vulnerability that comes from saying, this is me, this is my home, this is who I am. I recognizing at some point now, you can't hurt me any more than I've been hurt.
Yeah.
You can't, I'm not trying to be a pastor of a church. I'm not trying to make a name for myself. I mean, part of the benefit of getting older is you grow into the comfort of who you are. So, I'm going to be exploring different opportunities. And then there is this book that is, still, and if I was to show you my floor behind me over here, there's 5 file boxes that I opened this morning that I'm going through some material again. So the goal is that I will have a book out that doesn't just explain what has happened in the SBC, but at the encouragement of an editor, I'm going back and including more autobiographical material, and not just what happened in this convention, but what has happened with me.
Mm-hmm.
And because I hope that that'll be an encouragement to some folks to avoid mistakes I've made, to learn from them, but then also to get a frame of reference for some of the things we've been talking about, why change was important, how it happened, and why in some cases change never happened.
Well, many thanks to Marty Duren, Ben Cole, what they've done and what they will continue to do.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
So go check them out, blog.martyduren.com. Ben, stuck in the middle with you, x.com as well, under the moniker Baptist Blogger. Forgive me.
I missed that too.
There's only one. We've got to make sure that we get that, definite article, not an indefinite article, and make sure the Baptist Blogger over at X. So, hey guys, thanks for tuning in. This is a bit of a long form interview. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
If you did, let us know in the comments, or wherever in the comments at churchanswers.com or on YouTube, wherever you're tuning in. Would love to hear your thoughts on this interview, and if you like it, we'll do more. So all of you, take care. We'll see you next time.